Hi guys, it's a fluffy haired Adderley here. I thought I've been talking for a while about the idea of doing a bit of a chat before I went to an AA meeting, and then a bit of a chat afterwards. So here we go, this is the first half. So I'm about to do an AA Zoom meeting. Why am I doing it today versus any other day? So one has to be ferociously honest about why one hasn't done one when one could have done one. So consider this a bit of a preemptive strike. I'm doing this because I've got that sense at the margins of my heart and head. That's the physical manifestation of it. But in both of those things, I do think we think with our heart and our head. So at the margins, I just feel a sense of dis-ease, not disease, but dis-ease, you know, a sense of unease, a sense of foreboding, a sense of not even necessarily an increased sense of foreboding beyond the foreboding that we're all feeling about coronavirus. I am feeling an element of being unsettled by what I fear is going to be a bit of a sort of what's the word? Almost like an elastic band stretching and snapping point of us returning back or trying to return back to some semblance of normality. And it's not that I fear normality, but I do sort of fear a return to all of the everyday stresses, judgments, inability to take stock, take time, and a sort of ferocity of speed and consumption and impulsive and compulsive behavior that kind of distracts us away from all of our feelings. So, you know, on the one hand, as everyone does, I want life to return to normal, but then on the other, the return to normal has a whole heap of worries and fears and concerns there too. But then just forget the coronavirus if you can for just a second. I know when I know that my alcoholic brain is sort of, you know, positioning itself. I mean, there's a great phrase that they use in sobriety or rehab. It's this idea that you may stop like drinking, taking drugs, having sex, workaholism, overeating, undereating. You may stop the actual activity, the indulgence in the substance, but outside the room, your illness or your issue or condition or your addiction is busily doing press-ups, maintaining its own sort of energy, strength and virility, if you like, in terms of being able to get a hold on you again. And also I'm always put in mind of something that I remember talking about when I was in rehab and often in AA meetings, is this idea that this is a disease, you know, addiction of any form and compulsive behavior of any form. And that's why I think sometimes we can forget and not listen to great advice or great pearls of wisdom or great learnings that come from within 12-step recovery meetings or from addicts and alcoholics. The reason we ignore them is because they're defined as an alcoholic or an addict, or the meeting is defined as a 12-step. And so for many people, it's very easy to hold those things at arm's length and say, that's not me, it's not relevant to me. But my feeling about compulsive behavior, any compulsive behavior, and I think that most people can, you know, have alcoholic periods in their life and addictive periods in their life. And I would almost hazard to say that most people are an addict of something. It's just that so many of those things are sort of socially acceptable, which is why we've got millions of people with alcohol problems, but only a small minority recognize themselves as alcoholics because there's such a, you know, sense of judgment and shame and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things that's often said about any addictive behavior is the definition of it as a sort of illness, if you like, and the definition of addiction is that it's an illness that tells you you're not an addict. It's an illness that has built into its almost DNA the idea of denial, denying that the very thing that you're doing is the very thing that's going to kill you, harm you, make you unhappy or make others unhappy. Because if you think about it, it's a necessary part of it, isn't it? Because if you were to question it, and if you do question it, like you try to with rehab or AA or any of these things, you stop doing it. But the issue is that you might stop, you might put down the drink, you might stop, you know, indulging in the compulsive behavior. But there is, in my case, because alcohol was my main substance abuse, I now call whenever I'm getting that sort of skew with thinking about things, or where I'm going to start making snap judgments about things that aren't entirely logical or rational or sane, I call it alcoholic thinking, but it could be addict thinking, or it could just be compulsive thinking. I can just feel that at the margins of my heart and at the margins of my mind and my soul, that there's just a little bit of agitation. It's almost like the eye of a storm. And I've had the weird fortune of flying through hurricanes for a film that we did once. And when you get to the eye of the storm, there's a huge, the eye of the storm is actually the calmest part. And when you look down at the sea, when we were flying over the Pacific, you look down at the sea, that part of the sea is entirely calm, and all around it is choppy water. And so, for me, the analogy is that, I felt like I've been in the eye of the storm, quite calm, but at all times, there's that raging torrent of madness and danger and chaos that at any point could just grab my arm and pull me in. It's good to have these images sometimes. So I sort of feel like I've sustained myself for about 10 days or 12 days since my last AA meeting, and I'm like on what they call the eye wall of the hurricane, and I'm just getting a bit closer and closer and closer, and I'm running the risk of being pulled in. And once I'm pulled in, I'll become a jangly, absolutely chaotic mess. Now, that might not manifest itself in me being jangly and chaotic, but in terms of my reading of situations, I might be a bit short with the girls. I might misinterpret what Nadia's saying. I might see something as controlling when it's caring. All those kind of perceptions get a bit warped. So that's why I'm about to go into a Zoom AA meeting. See you on the other side. Okay, so I've just come out of my meeting, and once again, the sense of a collective thought. It's like, was it called hive thinking? It's just like the idea of just hearing so many people and seeing so many faces of people who've been in recovery, stopped drinking for a matter of weeks, days, through to people who've been sober for 23 years. It was a really meaningful hour. And it started with a reading about the idea of personality change and how alcohol makes your personality change, and how the reason we turn to alcohol, and when I use the word alcohol, replace it with any other substance. It could be food, it could be coffee, it could be sex, it could be whatever, as you know. But the idea that, the reason we take these things into our bodies is because they make us feel, sound different. They fortify us like a fortified wine. They make us feel like we have the strength to be louder, more outgoing, more extrovert, more confident, more assertive, less shy, all those kind of things. And people were talking about things like there's that sort of strange dichotomy or contradiction in the mind of the alcoholic or the person who struggles with compulsive behaviour, where you're not good enough to get help or feel better or have a solution in the form of, say, AA, or it could be a solution in terms of medical care, but at the same time you feel too good for it. So, one of my problems, I think, with the 12-step recovery programs is, on the one hand, I feel a bit shy and a bit sort of substandard because I haven't been for years, so that kind of makes me feel like I oughtn't to be there at all now. And then there's another part of me that justifies my not having been there as I'm slightly different and I'm slightly better. So it's that sort of strange double step of feeling like the smallest thing in the universe, but also the biggest thing in the universe too, because it's all about you. A lot of things said in there which are really relevant and salient for these self-isolating times in our coronavirus era. A lot of people will be struggling with when they have their first drink in a day, and if you're going through problems, if you're a problem drinker and you're struggling with whether you should pick up, I would say that the best thing you can do for yourself isn't to go to any sort of alcohol dependency group, other than go to a Zoom meeting of an open AA meeting, because in there you can quite immediately come clean and just say hello and just introduce yourself, and nothing is expected of you. You don't have to say a word. I tried to share. You click a sort of icon that puts your hand up, and again I was put in a list. I mean, I would say one of the slight sort of snags with the Zoom AA meeting is when you're in a meeting and you put your hand up, you can time when your hand goes up and whether you get picked. Whereas I put my hand up on this meeting, and I knew I was in a sort of list of people that he was going to, the chair of the meeting was working through, and you never quite know whether it's coming to you. And in the end, it didn't get to me. It was an hour's meeting, and a little bit you're sort of preparing. Although I don't like to pre-prepare what it is I'm going to say, you're often about to say something that's relevant to what's been shared or talked about just before you. And so that's a bit distracting. So part of me had wished I hadn't pressed the hands up icon, because I could have sat back and listened even more attentively. But again, it's that thing, there's lots of wisdom in listening to other voices, and you don't need to, my worry always with these 12-step recovery meetings is that, you need to belong to a group, you need to be part of the band already, that there's going to be a bit of a clique, and that if you're not a die-hard, committed, AAer who's part of that group, which is the group that I was in, then you're possibly not going to fit in. But of course, that's all of the alcoholic thinking. That's all of that thinking of alienation and isolation and feeling like you're on the fringes. But someone was talking about how important it is, and I think this is a really good strategy for anyone who's struggling with their own behaviour and their own ments, as Mental Marky would say, or their own mentals in lockdown. Is it always serves you well to, if you're kind of finding yourself doing things or behaving in a way that's erratic, or someone in your family is telling you, or that you're not yourself, or you're being a bit snappy or crabby, or things are just ruffling your feathers a bit too much, as they would do for anyone, just get everything out of your emotional rucksack, put it on the table, and do what they call a sort of inventory of all the things that are bothering you. Literally make a list of all the things that are really getting you down that day, and then make another list of all the things that you could possibly do to remedy it. Your head, in isolation, you can be within a family, but your head can really isolate you. And it was really nice hearing someone else in the group talking about the fact that when their head is in charge of themselves making the decisions, it generally goes wrong. And sometimes handing it over to the group, or airing your laundry with the group. I always remember someone else saying once, an AA meeting is like taking all your stinking thoughts, all your terrible feelings, all of your sort of nasty inclinations. It's like putting them in a bin liner, tying it up in the centre, going into the meeting and plonking the bag in the middle, and the fellowship will sweep it away for you. It's like a way of purging yourself. So in that sense, it is a bit like the confessional. It's a bit like a religious confessional. You're going. It's not a place where you sort of come clean about bad behaviour and then head off back into the world and do it again. It's about most alcoholics and addicts, and most people who are struggling in lockdown, the person you're being least kind to of all the people in your life is you. And sometimes that can manifest itself, obviously, in you seeming to be unkind to others. But you're kind of doing it in a way to sort of isolate yourself, punish yourself, sabotage your own comfort zone, sabotage your own support network with the people that love you. So, sometimes if you can just take yourself away, take yourself outside of the communal living, even if you're in a flat, sit down on your own, make a list of things, ask others in your group, and don't react. Ask others to make a list, perhaps write it down, perhaps text it to you, a list of all the things that they're feeling you're struggling with, and yet you possibly, in your worst times, aren't going to have the sort of objectivity to see that in yourself, and then read it. But read it knowing that these people have said this because they love you, they care for you. That's the thing, that's the major thing, is to trust that those around you want the best for you. One of the dangers, again, someone else said, is to think that you're so unique. Terminal uniqueness was the phrase someone used. And I think it's really important to remember that very few of us are going to be going through or feeling something that someone else isn't feeling too. We're all going through something very, very similar. The exact colour, shades and hues and space and physicality of what we're going through is going to be different for all of us. But don't let that make you feel terminally unique, i.e. none of these systems apply to you. Lots of people will say, hey, good God, no, I'm not an alcoholic, and yet carry on drinking, to excess. Whereas actually to go to an AA meeting, is to say, I recognise that maybe I need to sort of flag something up here, maybe I need to reach out, maybe I need to sort of test my own sobriety a bit, maybe I need to check in with a group of other people and see if there's anything that resonates with me. Don't be egotistically feeling like you're so unique that it leads to your demise. And I think one of the other things that came out of the meeting again is that I was very cross on our live earlier today, very angry with Matt Hancock, very angry with the way the government's doing things. And there are those things that you can control, but you have to accept in recovery that you have, of the bigger picture, you have zero control over the way the world's heading and civilization and all that kind of stuff. You've got to get on with it and you've got to be part of it. But at the same time, I think in this lockdown and in this crisis, the best best answer sometimes is, rather than try and grab hold of the system or the news flow and try and bend it round, or try to go searching on Google for the news that suits your opinion, or try and find, which I fall foul of all the time. My belief is that if I can control change, I can make things better. Actually, I can make things better for all of us in this space and in this house if I just relinquish control and recognise that not a lot can be done today. And there was a really good line someone mentioned towards the end of the meeting, where they said they came to AA because of drinking, and they stayed in AA for thinking. Came for drinking, stayed for thinking. And in that sense, I do think there is a great merit, a bit like how meditation works and mindfulness, that by puncturing your busy brain and your busy heart with pockets of air, think of it like a suspension system. You give yourself the space to breathe, you give yourself the space to be kinder to yourself, and you give yourself the space to process. I think that's something that we, as addicts and as alcoholics and people with many compulsive behavioural tics do, is we race faster than we can actually cope with what's coming into us. So then we hit a sort of log jam of emotion and we become overwhelmed. That's how anxiety works. It's about hurtling the body and the mind with so many things all at once that anxiety levels get high. So what we have to try and do is find a way of dealing with things bite size after bite size after bite size. So as you can see, after the meeting, lots to think about, lots of strategies, lots of phrases, lots of sayings, lots of friendly faces that I've just looked at, and makes me feel like there are many others out there feeling what I feel, some of them not feeling what I feel. They talked about very different things too, but all of us connected by the fact that we are needing to feel some sense of belonging in a shared experience.